Hello everyone and welcome to another Warcry battle report. Today we are back in the Varanite Siphon camp, where the Scions of the Flame will face off against the Iron Golems. So without further ado, let's get straight into the Warband's composition. Starting with the new addition to the channel, the Scions of the Flame, their Hammer squad will contain the Inferno Priest, the Brazen Champion, and an Initiate with the Hooked Axe. Moving on to the Dagger squad, it contains the Blazing Lord, the Fireborn with Sunblade and Chris, and another Fireborn. Lastly, in the Shield squad we have the Immolator and an Initiate with a Morningstar. Now moving on to the Iron Golems, their Hammer squad will contain the dreaded Ogre Breacher together with an Iron Golems Legionary. For their Dagger squad they will bring the Signifier, an Iron Legionary, and another Iron Legionary with Bolus. And finally, for the Iron Golem Shield squad, they will bring the Dominar, the Drillmaster, and an Armator. So, with the warbands now introduced, let's get to pulling some cards. Today we'll be playing in the Varanite Siphon camp with the following layout. For deployment, I pull Fog of War, so the majority of the fighters will be coming in turn 2. During this game, the Scions of the Flame will be represented by the yellow dice and the Iron Golems will be represented by the white dice. So, rolling off for deployment, the Iron Golems win and they choose to be the red deployment zone. For the victory card, I pulled the Ritual. For this victory condition, the warbands will roll off and the winner gets to decide who is the defender or the attacker. The defender will then place an objective token, which is the ritual site of this battle. At the end of each turn, the defenders will roll a d6 and that will be the amount of ritual points they get. When there are enemy fighters within 3 inches of the ritual site when the roll is made, for one fighter 1 is subtracted from the roll, and for 3 or more fighters it is subtracted by 3. The defenders will need 12 ritual points to win the game. So quickly rolling off. The Scions of the Flame manage to win the roll-off and they choose to be the defenders. They will place their ritual site on this building right here. Lastly, for the twist card, I pull the Creature in the Dark card, which basically means that no ranged attacks that have a range longer than 6 inches can be made. In addition, at the start of each round, the player with initiative will get the chance to try and assassinate one of the enemy fighters. This does, however, come with the condition that the fighter in question is isolated, and on an unlucky dice roll, the enemy player will instead get to pick an assassination target. So, with the warbands introduced and the cards pulled, let's get straight into turn 1 initiative. Starting with the Iron Golems, they roll 2 doubles and 2 singles. Next, the Scions of the Flame, and they also roll 2 doubles and 2 singles. Both warbands decide against using any wild dice, and so initiative is tied. Thus, a roll-off will decide who gets the first activation, and after a tie, the first activation goes to the Scions of the Flame. With only 2 fighters to start with on the board, the Scions will begin by moving their Fireborn up to the ritual site. In order to make this climb, they will use one of their doubles to use Rush. The Iron Golems will follow up by simply double moving one of their legionaries closer to the objective. The Lord of Flame then makes a pretty bold move by double moving into the legionary, hoping to keep the enemy squad away from the ritual site for as long as possible. After this, the Signifier will also move over to the Lord of Flame. To do this, they will also have to use a double for the rush ability. As all of the Scions of the Flame have already moved, the final fighter on the board at this point is the Legionary with Bolus, who will do something similar to the Fire Lord and walk to the edge of the board to try and keep some of the reinforcing fighters at bay. In order to make it this far, the Iron Golems will also use Rush once again. With all fighters having activated, the last step of the turn is to roll for the ritual points. Unfortunately for the Scions of the Flame, they only roll a 2. I did make a small mistake here by putting the dice on a 1, but I correct this later. And that's it for turn 1 already. As there weren't that many fighters on the board, not much was able to happen just yet. However, I'd say the Scions of the Flame are in a relative advantageous position right now, as the Iron Golems are quite slow and will probably have issues getting to the objective in time. Thus far, they do at least have time on their favor though, as the Scions only rolled a 2 for the ritual points. It's quite odd to think that the Scions of the Flame might also just lose by simply rolling bad on the ritual rolls, but I digress. So let's quickly move the Hammer and Shield squads onto the board and get straight into turn 2 initiative. Starting with the Scions this time, they will roll 2 doubles and 2 singles. Moving on to the Iron Golems, they will also roll 2 doubles and 2 singles once again. This time, however, both warbands begin playing with their wild dice, as the Scions try to claim initiative by using one of their wild dice, whereas the Iron Golems will use 2 of their wild dice, 1 to claim the initiative and 1 to make a triple. This means once again a roll-off will ensue to figure out who gets the first activation, and in this case it will go to the Iron Golems. They will use this opportunity to activate their signifier. First, the signifier will use the Stand Defiant triple ability, which will give him and his buddy 1 to toughness until the end of this battle round. After which he will use both of his actions to attack the Firelord. Hitting on 5s, his first attack unfortunately does nothing. Moving on to his second attack, this time he scores 2 crits, dealing a total of 8 damage. The Blazing Lord will then immediately retaliate using the double ability Beheading Strike, which will add a 3 in this case, half of the value of the ability, to the damage points allocated to each crit he will hit in the next melee attack. So hitting on 4s, on this first attack he gets a single crit which would deal 6 damage, however due to Beheading Strike this will total out at 9. Moving on to the next attack action. This time he scores a crit and 1 hit, which unfortunately for the Blazing Lord is 8 damage, just 1 damage short of finishing off the signifier. The Iron Legionary with Bolus is then going to do his absolute best to swiftly take out the Initiate with Morningstar. Hitting on 4s, the first attack will be a crit and a hit, dealing a total of 5 damage. Moving on to the second attack, he will once again roll a crit and a hit, and with 10 damage dealt in total, this is exactly enough to take out the Initiate. Back to the Scions of the Flame, the Fireborn is then going to avenge his fallen comrade by using the Fiery Might ability. This will grant him enough strength to hit on 3s. So moving on to his first attack action, he very sadly rolls absolutely nothing on his first attack. But maybe he'll redeem himself on his second attack action. And he sort of does, with a crit and 2 hits, dealing a total of 8 damage. Back to the Iron Golems, they activate the Ogre Breacher and use the Rush ability to get him into the fray. It was a bit of a tight cap, but in the end I decided that he would be allowed to move this way. The Immolator then tries to move towards the middle of the board, just using a double move. The Drillmaster then decides to double move towards the objective, hoping to threaten by potentially climbing up in a turn. Next, the Fireborn with the Sunblade and Chris is actually going to climb down and try to attack the Drillmaster. Hitting on 5s, she manages to score 2 damage. The Iron Legionary standing next to the Blazing Lord is then going to try to help the Signifier by attacking the Blazing Lord as well, rolling both of his attacks at the same time. Hitting on 5s, he scores 1 crit, dealing 4 damage. Next, one of the Initiates, this one with an axe, is simply going to double move underneath the ritual into the Drillmaster. Next, a very distant Iron Legionary begins trudging his way towards the action, by double moving onward before ending his turn. The Brazen Champion then also puts himself into the fray by putting himself in a position where he can attack the Drillmaster as well. The Dominar is going to make use of that though, and also double move in so he can attack the Brazen Champion next turn. And this brings us to the last 2 activations of this turn, the first being the Inferno Priest moving up but staying out of range of the Armator, and next the Armator double moving as close as he can. This brings us to probably one of the most crucial dice rolls of this turn. How many ritual points will the Scions of the Flame get? and very unfortunately for them, they only get 1. This definitely drastically reduces the chance that the Scions of the Flame will win, as even if they keep all of the Iron Golems off of the objective for the entire game, they will still need to roll a 9 in total, with only 2 dice. Definitely not impossible, but seeing their current luck, not too sure. In addition, the Iron Golems have not lost any fighters yet, whereas the Scions have already lost an Initiate, and their Blazing Lord is also not too healthy at this point. Quickly going over how the battlefield is looking though, the Scions are doing a good job of keeping the Iron Golems at a distance from the objective, with the sole exception being the Drill Master, who now is also heavily surrounded. With that said, let's move on to turn 3 initiative. Starting with the Scions of the Flame, they once again roll 2 doubles and 2 singles. As for the Iron Golems, they finally managed to break the cycle of same dice rolls and roll a triple and 3 singles. The Scions of the Flame will then use their 2 remaining wild dice to try and get initiative, but the Iron Golems will contest for it with their 1 wild dice as well. So another roll off for initiative, and the Iron Golems win it again. But before we get to the first activation, this is one of those moments where the twist could actually be a bit relevant. Because looking at the battlefield here, the Immolator in particular is just barely in range of his allies, enough so that he cannot be targeted by the assassination. Had the initiative gone to the Scions of the Flame, they would have been able to target this lone Iron Legionary. But alas, that leaves no viable targets, and so we will get to the first activation. So starting with the Signifier, he is once again going to use his triple to use the Stand Defiant ability, giving +1 toughness to all his friends nearby, after which he'll try to finish off the Blazing Lord. Hitting on 5s, the first attack only scores 1 hit, so he follows it up with a second attack, and this time he scores an additional crit, dealing a grand total of 6 damage. And so the Blazing Lord still stands, so he'll immediately use this opportunity to strike down the Signifier. He will use a double for Fiery Might to immediately blow right through all of that toughness that was just generated. He only needs to get 1 hit, and this first attack already strikes him down. This leaves him with a second attack action to throw against the Iron Legionary, hitting on 3s once again due to Fiery Might. He will score 3 hits this time, dealing a total of 6 damage to the Legionary. The Dominar then turns to the Fireborn with Sunblade and Chris and tries to take them out. Hitting on 3s, he gets 3 crits and a hit, which in total comes down to 17 damage, which is more than enough to take down the enemy fighter. He'll then use his remaining attack action to try to smash through the Brazen Champion as well. Once again hitting on 3s. This time he also scores 2 hits and 2 crits, dealing an additional 14 damage. Trying to come back from this, the Scions of the Flame will activate their Initiate with Hooked Axe and use a double for the Onslaught ability to attack the Drill Master. They will mainly be looking for crits though, as they do 4 damage apiece. So hitting on 5s, the first attack only scores a single crit. Moving on to the second, they only score 1 additional crit and no hits, thus dealing a total of 8 damage, which unfortunately is not enough to take out the Drill Master. The Armator then leaps into melee range with the Inferno Priest and uses their remaining action to attack them. Hitting on 4s, he scores a total of 3 hits, dealing 6 damage to the Inferno Priest. The Immolator then double moves into the fray, making sure they cannot be tied down by some of the remaining enemy fighters. However, this will prompt the Iron Golems to activate their Ogre Breacher, and they hope to make swift work of the remaining fireboard near the board edge. Hitting on 3s, the Ogre Breacher will need nothing more than a crit and a hit to take out this fighter. But he is actually fairly unlucky on his first roll, as he only scores 1 hit. Moving on to the second attack action, he scores 2 more hits, which is just barely enough to take the Fireborn out. The Inferno Priest is then going to try and burn through the 15 health of the Armator, using 2 attack actions. Hitting on 4s, she'll first score a crit and a hit, dealing a total of 6 damage, and then following it up with another crit, dealing a total of 10 damage. Not bad. The Iron Legionary is then going to try to finish off the heavily wounded Blazing Lord. He's only going to need to deal 2 damage, so a crit or 2 hits would be enough to do it. Hitting on 5s though, he manages to do it in the first attack action with a crit, taking out the Blazing Lord. He is going to use his remaining action to move into the fray. The Brazen Champion is then going to try to do some good damage against the Dominar. So, hitting on 3s. On his first attack action, he unfortunately misses everything. Moving on to the second attack action, he managed to get 1 crit and 1 hit, which means this turn he will deal a grand total of 9 damage. Next, the Drill Master attacks the Initiate with the Hooked Axe. She will hit on 3s, and for the first attack roll she rolls a crit and a hit, dealing 6 damage. Then for her second attack, hoping to finish him off, she sadly only rolls 1 hit, dealing a total of 8 damage, 2 damage short of a takedown. The lone faraway Iron Legionaries, one with Bolus, then both double move towards the fray, hoping to still contribute something in the final round, with little hope of doing so. And with that, turn 3 is already almost over. And the same could be the case for the battle as a whole, as if the Scions of the Flame don't roll a 3 or higher now for their ritual roll, they will have no way to win the battle anymore. So will they still have a shot to defend the ritual site with what is left, or will the victory be stolen from them by an unlucky dice roll or 3? There's only one way to find out the answer to that question. Let's roll the ritual dice. And luckily for them, they actually roll a 5, giving them decent chances to still win the battle. This does however mean that on the final turn, the objective cannot be surrounded with 3 or more Iron Golem fighters, as that will mean they will max roll a 3, which is too low to still win the battle. It is going to be difficult for them though, as they have lost quite a lot of fighters. In my opinion, the Iron Golems are absolutely dominating when it comes to combat, but they're not getting close enough to the objective in time. It can still swing both ways though, depending on how many fighters the Iron Golems are going to get near the objective, and how lucky the Scions of the Flame will be on their ritual roll next turn. So let's see what this final turn of the battle has in store for us. It's time for turn 4 initiative. Starting with the Scions of the Flame, they finally break their own tradition and roll a triple, a double and 1 single. The Iron Golems then follow suit and roll a triple and 3 singles. The Scions of the Flame are tired of contesting for initiative and will use their wild die to create a quad. On the other hand, the Iron Golems will use their wild die to create an additional double. As there are once again no lone fighters of relevance, we will go straight to the first activation of the Iron Golems, being the Dominar. Now he will try to take out the Brazen Champion within 1 attack action to make sure he can use his remaining action to get to the ritual site. He'll only need to do 4 damage, and hitting on 3s, he manages to do just that. With a crit, he deals enough damage to take out the fighter. He will then use the Lead with Strength double ability, which, because he has taken out the Brazen Fighter, lets him take 2 move actions, which gets him right onto the ritual site. The Scions are then going to do their absolute best to get rid of the second threat near the objective, being the Drill Master. They will activate their Immolator, and he will need to do 8 damage, which for him would mean 2 crits or 1 crit and 2 hits. Hitting on 4s, he sadly only manages to deal 7 damage, so a crit and hit, on his first attack. Thus he'll use his second action to seal the deal. And luckily he does manage to do this easily. But the Immolator is not done yet. He will use the Rampage quad ability to move over to the Iron Legionary nearby and try to take that one out as well, or at least lock him down. Hitting on 5s here. And with a crit and 2 hits, he actually manages to deal 9 damage, which is enough to take this fighter out as well. A bit of revenge from the Immolator for his fallen comrades. The final Iron Golem fighter willing to make a small impact, the Armator, is then going to use the Onslaught ability to take out the Inferno Priest. Hitting on 4s, he manages a crit and 2 hits, 8 damage, which actually finishes off the Inferno Priest. He will then use his remaining action to move as close to the objective as possible. At this point, there are no additional fighters from the Iron Golems team that can get close enough to the objective to make a difference. In addition, there is no way for the Scions of the Flame to get rid of the Dominar and the Armator. Therefore, a -1 on their ritual is guaranteed. And so victory is now truly in the hands of the dice gods. Will the Scions of the Flame roll a lucky 5 or 6? Or will the victory go to the Iron Golems? Only one way to find out. Here we go. And the Scions of the Flame actually managed a lucky 5. Despite being slaughtered for the majority of the game, the ritual points came in clutch and just barely secured them the win. And so for this battle, victory will go to the Scions of the Flame. So that was it for today's battle. Now, as always, this section of the video will have a little bit of after talk from me about the battle, but I also have some channel updates near the end. So if you're interested in that, stick around for a little bit, and otherwise, thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoy the bat reps, please give them a like, give them a share, you know, all that goodness. Helps out the channel a lot. My Ko-fi is also in the description if you'd like to help out that way. And I hope to see you in the next Warcry battle report. Okay, now a little bit about today's battle. I'm still not so sure how I feel about these types of scenarios. Like, on one side I think the ritual dice rolls every single turn make it very tense. On the other side, the combination of these cards with the Iron Golems coming in late and them also being a slow warband kind of felt like it was just only up to those ritual dice rolls. I do also have to admit here, I do think I could have played the Iron Golems a bit better, in the sense that their killing power was not lacking and I was just fully enjoying that, but I should have probably focused on disengaging and moving a bit more. I could have, for instance, also used wild dice to create more quads and that way use rampage to just get more fighters into the fray quicker. But the thing is, I feel like the core abilities of Warcry are just a bit too powerful and I really wanted to showcase the faction abilities in this battle as well. Like, I had it a lot of times during this battle where I was like, should I just use the core ability here, like Onslaught, because I think it's generally just mathematically better? Or do I want to use the cool ability that the faction provides, even though I kind of know it's probably a worse idea? So yeah, I'm curious to hear what you think of me basically playing this way, effectively throwing a little bit for faction flavor, so to say. I think that's all I have to say about the battle though. Had a lot of fun recording it, was fun editing it, and I hope you enjoyed watching as well. Simple as. Now for the elephant in the room, the channel update. Some of you may have noticed that I haven't uploaded in a while. A little long while. Now, when I initially started uploading on this channel again and started making battle reports, I was in a pretty stable situation in my life. I was just doing my bachelor's degree, nothing too schmancy going on, it was all good. Since I stopped uploading, that situation has become a lot more chaotic. And so I'd love to promise that I will upload 1 video per month next year. Like, take that as a New Year's resolution, so to say. But I don't have any guarantee that I can actually follow up on that right now. In addition, I found that making these videos takes particularly long in the editing department. So I'm also thinking of maybe throwing in some other types of content, like for instance some D&D or other TTRPG content that I'm interested in, maybe some painting sessions or just painting tutorials, or hell, even commentary on things in the Warhammer world. I might just try to do some experimental stuff in that vein in between, but yeah, if you have any suggestions on that, let me know as well. In any case, if you have actually made it this far, thanks a lot for watching and also hearing my little life rant. I wish you all a very pleasant day and a happy holiday season, and I'll see you in the next video next year.